I learned to walk quietly in my father's house heels. Striking floorboards meant his fist striking flesh. By the time I turned 24, I'd memorized every creaking step, every loose board, the exact angle to open my bedroom door without the hinges announcing my presence. Survival, I'd discovered, was about making yourself small enough to slip between the cracks of a man's anger. Virginia in 1882 was green and close, trees pressing in like walls. Our house sat at the end of a rutted road where nobody came unless they had to. Mama used to say we were blessed with privacy. After she died, I understood she'd meant we were cursed with isolation. When Papa's fists found me, there was nobody to hear, nobody to see, nobody to care. I can still smell that house. Tobacco and whiskey and the thick silence that came before violence. The sound of his boots on the stairs. 1, 2, 3 heavy steps. Then the pause outside my door. The weight of waiting to see if he'd pass by or push through. I learned to hold my breath during those pauses. Learned that breathing too loud could tip the scales. Mama never fought back. I used to think that made her weak. Watching her accept his rage with bent shoulders and downcast eyes. Now I wonder if she was just tired, so deeply, endlessly tired, that fighting seemed like more effort than surviving. She died quiet too. Pneumonia taking her in her sleep. Maybe that was the only peace she ever got. After her funeral, I found the advertisement tucked inside her Bible. Yellowed paper, folded so many times the creases had worn through. Mail-order brides wanted for Western territories, seeking capable women for frontier life. The paper trembled in my hands. Had Mama thought about leaving? Had she held this escape route and chosen to stay? Or had she simply lacked? The $15 for a train ticket, I had exactly $15 sewn into the lining of my winter coat. 3 years of secret saving pennies from the egg money. Coins found in Papa's pockets when I did his washing. The occasional quarter from selling preserves in town. I'd been saving without knowing what for. Now I knew. Thomas Garrett's letter arrived 2 weeks after I mailed my response. His handwriting was cramped, but legible. His words practical to the point of bluntness. Seeking capable woman for ranch life. Montana winters are hard. Must be strong and willing to work. I can offer marriage, shelter, and fair treatment. He didn't mention love. Neither did I in my reply. We were negotiating survival, not romance. I focused on one word in his letter, capable. When had anyone called me that Papa called me useless? Clumsy. Stupid. The women at church called me poor dear with pitying eyes that made my skin crawl. But capable, that word held weight. It suggested I might be enough for something. Somewhere. The train ticket sat in Mama's Bible, where her advertisement had been. 3 days until departure. Virginia would become memory, if I was lucky. So would fear. I wasn't running toward love. I was running from fists. If that made me a coward, at least I'd be a living one. That last night in Papa's house, I lay awake listening to him snore, drunk in his room. I thought about leaving a note, some explanation. But what could I say that I was fleeing? Because staying meant dying, slowly or quickly. But dying all the same, that I chose the unknown over the known, because at least the unknown held. Possibility I left before dawn with my carpet bag and Mama's Bible. Walked the 5 miles to town without looking back. The station smelled of coal smoke and strangers' sweat. The press of bodies all heading somewhere else. I bought my ticket with shaking hands. The clerk barely glanced at me. Just another woman going west. Just another story nobody would ask about. As the train pulled away, I watched Virginia blur past the window. Green fields, thick forests, the mountains that had hemmed me in my whole life. Every mile was a mile farther from his fists. I let myself breathe fully for the first time in years. I met Margaret in Pennsylvania. She boarded at a stop outside Philadelphia, and I knew her immediately the same worn traveling dress, the same nervous hands gripping a carpet bag, the same careful way of taking a seat that suggested she too had learned to make herself small. We sat across from each other for 20 miles before she spoke. "Montana?" she asked, her voice soft but steady. I nodded. "Surprised?" "You too." Her smile was the first kindness I'd encountered in months. Real warmth. No pity behind it. "I've got an advertisement in my bag. Mail order bride. Man named Samuel Garrett. Rancher outside Helena." She laughed, self-conscious. "I can't quite believe I'm doing this." My heart stopped. "Garrett." "My husband's name is Garrett, too. Thomas Garrett." We stared at each other. Then Margaret's laugh came again, stronger this time. "It's got to be brothers. Has to be." "What are the odds?" She pulled out Samuel's letters. I found Thomas's, and we compared. Same return address, just different names. Samuel and Thomas Garrett, neighboring ranches that shared a border. "We're going to be neighbors," Margaret said, and something in my chest loosened. Not alone. Whatever waited in Montana, I wouldn't face it entirely alone. The landscape changed as we traveled west. Green gave way to gold, then to the harsh brown of plains that stretched forever. I'd never seen land this open, in Virginia. Trees closed in like walls. Here. The sky went on endlessly. I didn't know if that meant freedom or exposure. Margaret talked while I listened. 3 younger siblings back in Boston depending on her factory wages. Work that paid too little, cost too much. Samuel's letters had been kind, she said. His words careful and respectful. She spoke of him like he was already real, already hers. I couldn't imagine Thomas Garrett as anything but words on paper. "What about your family?" Margaret asked on the second day. I hesitated. "Father, he's..." I needed to leave. I couldn't say more. Couldn't shape it into words yet. Margaret's eyes held understanding without questions. She'd run too. We both had. That was enough. On the 3rd night, somewhere in Wyoming, Margaret proposed the pact. The train car was dark, most passengers sleeping. She leaned forward, voice low. "If either man proves dangerous, if either of us needs to leave, we go together. Both of us. Neither one faces the wilderness alone." I grabbed her hand, held tight. "Both of us." I repeated. My hand shook. Hers didn't, but she held on anyway. We pulled into Helena just after dawn on the 7th day. The station was smaller than I'd imagined, rougher. 2 men waited on the platform, and I knew them instantly, the Garrett brothers. They had the same build, same weathered faces, but different eyes. Samuel stepped forward first, smiling, helping Margaret down with gentle hands. "Miss Coleman, I'm Samuel. Welcome to Montana." His voice held warmth. Real pleasure at her arrival. Thomas stood apart, arms crossed, assessing. When I stepped down, he didn't offer his hand. "You're smaller than I expected," he said. "Ranch work requires strength." Pride flared hot in my chest. I almost spoke back. Almost told him I'd survived things that would break a stronger man. But fear silenced me. I needed this refuge too badly to risk it on the first day. "I'm stronger than I look," I said instead. Meeting his eyes, he nodded once. "We'll see." Margaret's hand found mine briefly as we stood on that platform. Her squeeze said, "Remember the pact." I squeezed back. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. Montana stretched ahead like a promise I was afraid to believe. But Margaret stood beside me, And for the first time since Mama died, I wasn't entirely alone. Thomas's ranch was smaller than I'd expected, rougher. The house needed work-sagging porch, windows that didn't quite fit their frames. The kind of neglect that comes from a man living alone too long. He showed me around with a list of expectations, watching my reactions like a shopkeeper checking merchandise. "Can you cook for ranch hands?" he asked at the kitchen. "Mend work clothes, manage a chicken coop." I answered honestly. Yes to cooking basic meals. Yes to mending. Mama had taught me that, at least. No to chickens. But I'd learn. His face revealed nothing, just that same assessing stare. "Bedroom's yours," he said finally, nodding toward the only private room. "I'll sleep in the barn until you've decided to stay." It should have felt gentlemanly. Instead, his tone suggested he doubted I would stay. Like the bedroom was a temporary accommodation for a guest who'd soon be leaving. "I'm staying," I said, sharper than I meant. "We'll see," he said again. That phrase was apparently his favorite. That night I lay in my bedroom, staring at ceiling boards that needed mending. Everything here was built for endurance, not comfort, including him, I suspected. The house held the silence of long solitude, broken only by wind and the distant sound of him moving in the barn. I wondered what his first wife had been like, the woman who'd slept in this bed before me. Had she left because of Montana or because of him? Margaret appeared the next morning, walking the half-mile between properties. Samuel's ranch was more established, warmer. She glowed already, happiness lighting her face as she described her first night. Samuel had made her coffee, shown her around gently, asked about her journey. They'd talked until late. Real conversation. She'd laughed, she said. Actually laughed. The contrast stung. "Give him time," Margaret said. Seeing my face, "These men live alone too long, they forget how to be gentle." But I saw the worry in her eyes. She'd found kindness. I'd found testing. That evening, Thomas laid out his expectations over dinner. His cooking was plain beans, bread, coffee strong enough to strip paint. "I need a wife who can survive Montana winters," he said, not looking at me. "I need to know you won't break when things get hard. I'm not cruel, but I won't coddle." "I don't need coddling," I said. "I need respect." He looked at me then. Really looked. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe. "I'll show you I'm capable," I continued, holding his gaze. "But I expect the same respect you'd give any ranch hand." Long silence. Then a slow nod. "Fair enough." It wasn't romance. It was a trial employment. But I'd come here for safety, not love. If I had to prove myself to earn that safety, fine. I'd been proving myself my whole life. That night I unpacked my bag with deliberate care. Each item placed was a choice Mama's Bible on the bedside table. My spare dress hung in the warped wardrobe. My brush laid on the washstand. Small claims of territory. I'd prove I belonged here. Not to him, to myself. I could leave now, walk to Margaret's, ask for help going back east. But I'd run from one man already. How many times could I run before I forgot how to stand still? Montana was hard. Thomas was harder. But I'd survived Papa's fists. I could survive this. The wind picked up outside, rattling the loose windows. Winter would come, he'd said so repeatedly. Like winter was some kind of test. I'd inevitably fail. Let it come. I'd show him what a Virginia girl could endure. I learned the ranch's rhythms in those first weeks. Up before dawn, when the sky was still black, the cold sharp enough to sting. Coffee first, I watched how he made it. Strong and bitter. And learned to make it the same way. Then breakfast for him and 2 ranch hands. Men who nodded at me silently and ate without comment. The kitchen became my territory. The stove had a temperamental door that stuck unless you lifted while pushing. The flour bin needed refilling from the barn storage. Water came from a pump that fought you for every bucket. My hands, soft from Virginia's easier life, blistered and bled those first days. Thomas questioned everything. That's not how we do it here. He'd say about my cooking. Too much salt. Not enough. Biscuits too dense. I made them again. And again. My fourth attempt. He took 3. Didn't say they were good. Just took 3. I counted them like gold coins. He corrected my cleaning wrong order. He said, criticized my garden attempt in soil that fought every seed. Watched me struggle with the chicken coop like a teacher watching a student fail a test he'd already graded. Never cruel, but relentless in his scrutiny. Every task was an examination I had to pass without knowing the standards. I wanted to scream sometimes. Wanted to throw a plate, slam a door, tell him I was doing my best, and if that wasn't enough. He could cook his own damned meals, but I'd learned control in a harder school than this. Each correction felt like Papa's silence before the blow. And I had to remind myself, words aren't fists. Words aren't fists. This wasn't violence, just coldness. But there were small kindnesses, too. If I let myself notice them. The stove door I'd mentioned was sticking. He fixed it without telling me. And I only discovered it when it opened smoothly one morning. Extra firewood appeared by the kitchen door. Coffee left warming on the stove the one day I overslept. Exhausted from scrubbing floors. I wondered when I'd started counting his footsteps. When had his silence become familiar instead of frightening? When had I started listening for the sound of his boots on the porch, the signal that he was coming in for dinner? Small familiarities. Creeping in like weeds. Margaret visited weekly. Walking between ranches with news of Samuel's kindnesses. He was teaching her to ride. They laughed at dinner. He'd bought her a new dress in town. Each visit, the gap between our experiences felt wider. Is he treating you well? Margaret asked one afternoon, her eyes too knowing. I couldn't quite answer. He wasn't cruel, but he wasn't warm either. He's fair, I said finally. Just testing. Still, her frown deepened. You've been here 3 weeks. He's careful, I said, defending him without meaning to. Can't fault a man for being careful, but I could fault him. Did fault him. At night, lying alone in that bedroom while he slept in the barn, I faulted him plenty. The fence broke during my 2nd week, posts rotted through from age and weather. I found him working on it and helped without being asked. Holding the new posts while he hammered. My hands blistered again. I didn't complain. We worked in silence, finding a rhythm, me holding steady. Him driving nails with efficient strikes. I noticed how he was gentle with the wood, patient when a nail bent, careful not to split the grain. He was gentlest with broken things. I realized horses with injuries, equipment that needed mending, fence posts that had to be coaxed into alignment. Did he see me as something broken to or breaking when the fence was done? He paused, looked at my bloodied hands, almost said something, then just, good work. 2 words. I held them like a candle against wind, fragile and warm, proof that I was capable of something he valued. That night, I set 2 coffee cups out for morning. Old habit. I told myself, we were married. After all, married people had coffee together, but lies, myself answered. I was hoping, starting to hope he'd come inside for breakfast instead of taking his coffee to the barn. Starting to hope for small things, dangerous things. Hope led to caring. Caring led to vulnerability. Vulnerability meant pain. I left the cups there anyway. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. I recognized Papa's handwriting before I opened it, cramped. Angry script that seemed to accuse even on paper. My hands started shaking. The paper smelled like Virginia. Tobacco and whiskey and rage carried 1,000 miles by post. How had he found me? Who had told him where I'd gone? His words were what I expected. Demanding I return. Claiming ownership, legal right, paternal authority. The threats were veiled but clear. I was his daughter. His property. How dare I run like a thief in the night I burned the letter in the kitchen stove. Watching the edges curl and blacken, my throat closed. My hands remembered the shape of fear curled tight, protecting ribs that had broken before. I thought I'd left this behind. Thought distance meant safety. But his words had reached me anyway, poison traveling through the postal system. Thomas came in for dinner and saw my face. I tried to compose myself, but my hands still trembled as I set his plate down. "Trouble from back east?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Nothing I can't handle," I said. My voice cracked on the last word. He was quiet for a long moment, chewing slowly. Then, my father was a hard man, too. I looked at him, surprised. He never talked about personal things, never shared anything beyond ranch business and daily necessities. Believed kindness made a man weak, he continued, staring at his coffee. Beat strength into me until I stopped crying, stopped feeling. I spent 20 years trying to be hard enough that nothing could hurt me again. He met my eyes. I know a fear letter when I see one. Something in me cracked. Not broke, cracked. Like ice under pressure. I came here because staying meant not surviving. I said, maybe slowly, maybe quickly. But I was dying there. I know you doubt I'm strong enough for this life. But I'm stronger than I look. I had to be. I don't doubt your strength, he said quietly. I doubt whether anyone should have to be that strong. The words hit me like a fist, but soft, painful in their gentleness. I turned away before he could see the tears, busied myself washing dishes, hands in soapy water, blinking hard. He brought his coffee cup to the basin instead of leaving it on the table. Our hands brushed in the water. Rough calluses, unexpected warmth. Neither of us pulled away immediately. The moment stretched. Fragile as spun sugar. "Thank you," I said. "For understanding." He nodded. Just that. But something had shifted between us. A wall coming down brick by brick. That night I lay awake thinking about his words. We were the same. I realized. Both taught that survival meant hardness. Both afraid that softness meant death. Both so busy protecting ourselves that we'd forgotten how to be gentle. I touched the spot on my hand where his fingers had brushed mine. The skin still felt warm. I was in trouble. I realized. The kind of trouble I'd run across the country to avoid. The kind that makes you hope. I'd started caring what he thought of me not as an employee passing inspection, but as a woman. As someone who mattered. That was dangerous. Caring meant vulnerability. Vulnerability had always meant pain. But maybe, a small voice whispered, not always, not with everyone, not here. I told the voice to hush. Hope was a luxury I couldn't afford, but I fell asleep with my hand still warm from his touch. And my dreams were gentler than they'd been in years. The town meeting was held the first Saturday of every month. Ranchers gathering to discuss community needs. Water rights, winter preparations. Thomas brought me to the October meeting, my first time being introduced publicly as his wife. The hall smelled of coffee and sawdust and judgment. Wooden benches, a pot-bellied stove. Men in their good shirts, and women in their church dresses. Eyes assessed me as we entered, some curious, some pitying, A few openly skeptical. Mail-order brides were novelty and shame combined. Women desperate enough to marry strangers. I felt like livestock at auction. Inspected, found wanting. Margaret and Samuel arrived minutes later, and my heart lifted at the sight of her. She was visibly pregnant now, just starting to show, glowing with the kind of settled happiness I envied. Samuel's hand rested on her back, protective and proud. Thomas sat a careful 6 inches from me. That space felt like miles. The meeting dragged through water disputes and fence lines and the quality of this year's hay crop. Then discussion turned to winter preparations. One rancher, Hutchins, a man with a face like sun-dried leather, stood to speak. "Some of us have capable wives," he said, looking pointedly at Samuel and Margaret. "Others might need extra help getting through this winter." His eyes flicked to Thomas, then to me. The implication was clear. A few men chuckled. I felt my face burn. Thomas said nothing, just sat there, jaw tight, staring at the floor. The silence stretched. I waited for him to speak, to defend me, to tell Hutchins I was capable. Counted heartbeats. 10, 20, 30. His jaw was set, but his mouth stayed closed. That silence cut deeper than Hutchins's words. Deeper than Papa's fists. This was choice. Thomas was choosing not to defend me. Into that silence, Margaret stood. Her chair scraped loud against the floor. Every head turned. "My husband's brother has a good woman," Margaret said, her voice shaking but clear. "The town just doesn't see it yet. Give her a Montana winter, then judge." Samuel stood too, his hand finding Margaret's. "My sister-in-law is strong. Anyone who doubts it will eat their words come spring." The room shifted, uncomfortable. I felt gratitude war with shame. I needed another woman to defend me. Needed Margaret's courage because I had none of my own, and Thomas had given me none of his. But Margaret's courage sparked mine. I stood, legs shaking. "I don't ask for special treatment," I said, meeting Hutchins's eyes. "I'll prove myself same as anyone." The ride home was silent. Thomas drove the wagon, staring straight ahead. Finally, as we neared the ranch, he spoke. "You didn't need Margaret to speak for you." Anger flared, hot and sudden. "You didn't speak for me at all." His jaw tightened. "I wanted to see if you'd speak for yourself. I'm not one of your horses to break." The words exploded out. "I'm your wife. If you can't see my worth by now, a winter won't change it. I'm not on trial, Thomas. I'm a person, and I deserve better than constant testing." He pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the house, turned to face me, his eyes finally showing something real pain, maybe regret. "You're right," he said. "You do deserve better." We sat there in the wagon as the sun set, neither of us moving. The first snow began to fall, light flakes drifting down like ash. Earlier than usual for October. The old-timers at the meeting had predicted a brutal winter. It was coming. I could feel it in the cold air, see it in the gray sky. Winter would test us all. Would test me and Thomas. Watching me with those guarded eyes, was still waiting to see if I'd break. I climbed down from the wagon without his help and walked into the house alone. Let him wonder. Let him wait. I was done proving myself for men who refused to see. The week after the town meeting, snow fell steadily. Not the gentle flakes of that first night, but heavy, relentless storms that turned the world white. Thomas's testing hadn't stopped, if anything. Winter's approach seemed to intensify his scrutiny. "Winter will show what you're made of," he said at breakfast one morning, like a judge pronouncing sentence. I wanted to scream. Margaret fought through the snow to visit me on Thursday. She was showing more now, her pregnancy obvious even under her heavy coat. The walk between ranches was dangerous in this weather, but she came anyway. "I can't do this," I told her, breaking down completely as soon as we were alone. "He'll never see me as enough. Every day is another test I don't know how to pass." Margaret held me while I cried, my tears soaking into her shoulder. "You have a choice," she said finally, pulling back to look at me. "Samuel and we'd help you get back east. Buy your ticket. Give you money to start over. You don't have to stay just because you're here." The words hung between us. Real escape. Actually offered. That night, I packed my carpet bag, sat on the bed staring at my few possessions, everything I owned fitting into one small bag. My whole life, that small. I thought about Virginia, about Papa's house, about the train west, about every choice that had led me here. I'd run from Virginia. What would another running solve? I'd be the woman who ran forever running, forever proving Papa right when he said I was weak. But staying hurt? God, it hurt. Living with a man who wouldn't see me, who tested instead of trusting, who kept me at arm's length while I was falling for him inch by painful inch. Because that's what had happened. Somewhere between the fence mending and the coffee cups and the brush of hands in dishwater, I'd started caring, started hoping, started loving. Maybe. And that terrified me more than anything. Thomas came to the house late. After checking livestock in the snow, he saw the packed bag on my bed before I could hide it. His face went carefully blank. That emptiness I'd learned to read as hurt. "You're leaving," he said. Not a question. I was considering it. I met his eyes. "You make me feel like I'm constantly failing a test I don't understand." He stood there, snow melting off his coat onto the floor, and for a long moment said nothing. "Then my first wife left after 6 months, said Montana was too hard. I was too hard. She went back to St. Louis and married a shopkeeper. I waited. I swore I'd never let myself need someone who'd leave again." His voice was rough, like the words cost him. "So I've been making sure you could survive. Making sure I wouldn't—" He stopped. Couldn't finish, but I understood. He'd been protecting himself, testing me to prevent needing me, keeping distance to prevent loss. "I'm not her," I said, "and I won't be tested for someone else's sins." "I know." He looked at the bag. "Are you leaving?" I looked at the bag, too. At my whole life folded into fabric and leather, at the door that led to escape, at the man standing in melting snow, finally vulnerable, finally real. "I'm unpacking this bag," I said slowly. "I'm staying." But things change between us. Thomas. They have to. I won't live like this, proving myself endlessly for someone who refuses to see. "If you can't meet me halfway, I leave anyway. Not because Montana's too hard, but because you are." He nodded. Just that. But something fundamental shifted in the room. In the air between us. That night the temperature plummeted. The thermometer outside the kitchen window showed numbers I'd never imagined possible. The wind howled like wolves. Inside, I lay in bed listening to the storm build, knowing the real winter was just beginning. Everything would change now. I could feel it coming, with the cold. The blizzard hit 3 days later, the worst storm in 20 years, people said afterward. Thomas and the ranch hands were checking distant pastures when the temperature dropped and the wind rose and the snow came horizontal, blinding. They were cut off. I was alone with the homestead, the near barn, the animals that depended on me. I could have panicked. Instead, I made lists. Firewood I'd need triple the usual amount. I dragged logs from the pile until my arms screamed, stacked them by the kitchen door. The porch, the bedroom, filled every available space. Food rations calculated, water sources secured. Moved the chickens to the sheltered side of the barn, brought buckets of snow inside to melt for water. My father had taught me nothing about love, but he'd taught me about endurance, about surviving when nobody was coming to help, about being your own rescue. I'd survived him. I could survive weather. The first day I kept the stove burning constantly, fed it through the night, slept in short bursts. The second day the temperature dropped further. Water buckets froze inside the house. I wrapped myself in every blanket, every coat, kept moving to stay warm. My breath was visible, even indoors. I could see the cold, could feel it trying to kill everything. On the third day, I found the bay mare with colic, one of Thomas's best horses, gut seized and in agony. She could die, would die without help. I remembered watching Thomas treat it before walking the horse constantly, massaging the belly, keeping blood flowing. I led her in circles around the barn for hours. My hands cramped. My back ached. My feet went numb. I talked to her while we walked, told her stories about Virginia, about Margaret, about Montana and stubborn men and women who refused to quit. You're not dying on my watch. I told the mare, we're both surviving this. She recovered. Late on the third day, she passed gas and manure, the crisis ending. I nearly cried with relief. The blizzard broke that evening. Thomas and the hands fought through the drifts, expecting disaster. I watched them approach from the kitchen window, 3 men on horseback, moving slowly through snow that reached the horses' chests. Thomas dismounted at the porch. I could see him bracing himself, expecting to find me terrified. The house cold. Livestock lost. He opened the door. Warm air hit him. The smell of coffee, of soup on the stove. I stood at the counter, exhausted but upright, stirring beans methodically. The fire was banked. The wood was stocked. Everything was in order. He stopped in the doorway and just stared. His face changed, really changed. I watched the walls crumble, watched respect bloom, watched something like wonder take root. He couldn't finish. I handed him a bowl of soup. I kept things running. I said, not bitter, just fact. That's what capable means. He set the bowl down, untouched. The bay mare had colic. Walked her through it. She's fine. Tears gathered in his eyes. This hard man, this testing man, standing in his warm house with tears on his weathered face. I was wrong, he said, not about you, about me. I was so afraid of needing you that I couldn't see you were already everything I needed. He told me then about his first wife, the whole story. How she'd hated Montana's isolation, hated the cold, hated the work. How she'd left him convinced that any woman who came here would eventually leave. That needing someone, depending on someone, was setting himself up for abandonment. So he'd tested me, pushed me, kept me at distance to protect his heart from breaking again. I thought if you could prove you didn't need me, then maybe I could risk needing you. He said, I had it backward. I could have left the vulnerability one-sided, could have accepted his apology and kept my own walls up. But I was tired of walls, tired of protection, tired of being afraid to hope. I was afraid too, I said. Afraid that letting myself need this need you would be like needing Papa's approval. A need that only brought pain. I stepped closer, took his hand, rough calluses, warmth, rightness. But you're not him. And I'm not running anymore. I'm choosing this life, this place, you. If you'll meet me halfway, more than halfway, he said, pulling me close, all the way. You're not on trial anymore. You never should have been. He held me then. Not passion, but presence. Two people who'd learned to be alone, choosing togetherness. I cried into his shirt, weeks of fear and frustration and desperate hope finally released. He cried too. I felt his tears in my hair. During the blizzard, I'd been testing myself, proving to myself that I was capable, strong, worthy, and I'd passed. Not for him, for me. That night we slept in the same room for the first time. Just close. Just present. Outside, the snow kept falling, but inside we'd found warmth. Not the explosive passion of dime novels, but something steadier. Something that might last. I'd spent my life being tested by Papa's fists, by Thomas's doubts, by Montana's cold. But this time I'd tested myself, and I was enough. Finally, fully, I was enough. Spring came slowly to Montana. Ice melted first in patches, revealing brown earth, then green shoots pushing through. Defiant and determined. The world opened after winter's closure. My first Montana winter. Survived and conquered. Everything between Thomas and me had changed. He made coffee my way now, less bitter. A touch of sugar. Consulted me on ranch decisions. Deferred to my judgment on the house and garden. We worked together, planting spring crops, finding the rhythm of partnership. Sometimes I'd catch him smiling at me when he thought I wasn't looking. Sometimes he'd catch me doing the same. We returned to the town meeting in April. Hutchins was there, the man who'd doubted. When he saw me, he approached, hat in his hands. "Heard about the blizzard," he said gruffly. "Heard you handled 3 days alone. Saved Tom's best mare, too." He met my eyes. "That's Montana stock. I was wrong about you." It was grudging, but it was respect. I accepted it with a nod. No triumph in my smile. I didn't need his validation anymore. I knew my worth. After the meeting, I walked to Margaret's house. She was heavily pregnant now, glowing and round and beautiful. We sat on her porch in the weak spring sunlight. Two women who'd met on a train going west. "Thank you," I said, "for standing up for me." That day at the meeting, it changed everything. Margaret smiled, her hand on her belly. We lift each other. That's how we survive, not just Montana, but men who forget we're strong until we prove it. And then they remember forever. We laughed, deep and knowing. Two mail-order brides who'd become sisters, who'd found in female friendship a strength that made everything else possible. A new bride arrived from Kansas that month, young and overwhelmed and terrified. I found her crying in the general store, clutching a letter from a husband who sounded cold in his welcome. I sat with her, held her hand, told her my story. "It's hard at first," I said, "but you're stronger than you know, and you're not alone." I gave her my address, Margaret's address, told her about the pact. She gripped my hand like a lifeline. I saw myself in her eyes, the fear, the desperate hope. I could ease that. Could be for her what Margaret had been for me. That evening, Thomas told me he loved me. We were washing dishes together, an ordinary moment made extraordinary by its ordinariness. He just said it. Simple and true. "I love you." I set down the plate I was holding. Looked at him. Really looked. This man who'd tested me, frustrated me, challenged me, and finally seen me. This man who'd learned that strength in a wife didn't diminish him, but completed him. "I love you too," I said, "and I choose you. Every day, I choose you." It wasn't the passionate declaration of novels. It was better the steady truth of partnership, of two damaged people learning to trust again, to hope again, to love again. Margaret gave birth in May, a healthy girl with Samuel's eyes. Thomas and I visited, brought gifts, held the baby with the kind of wonder that comes from seeing new life in harsh country. Samuel glowed with pride. Margaret glowed with exhausted joy. Their happiness was hard-won and therefore precious. Walking home through spring twilight, Thomas took my hand. "Would you want that?" he asked. "Hildren," I thought about the risk, the fear, the vulnerability, about bringing life into this hard country, about trusting the future enough to create it. "Yes," I said. "Someday, when we're ready." He squeezed my hand. We walked home through land that was finally, truly ours. I'd come west, running from cruelty, expecting hardship. I'd found both. But I'd also found Margaret's friendship, which taught me that women supporting women creates a strength that weathers any storm. I'd found Thomas's respect, earned on equal ground through honesty and endurance. And I'd found myself not the frightened girl fleeing Virginia, but a woman who chose her life deliberately. With eyes wide open and heart willing to hope, Margaret and I had met on that train west, both nervous, both running from something. We'd both found where we belonged, not just in Montana, not just with men who learned to see us, but in ourselves. We'd found the courage to claim our worth. I used to measure safety by silence. Now I measured it by laughter, by arguments we could have without fearing violence, by choices that were mine to make. Montana had tested me, but testing wasn't cruelty, it was respect. Montana doesn't coddle. Neither does love. Both demand you show up fully. Both reward you when you do. True partnership requires testing to find solid ground. But sometimes the testing reveals the ground was solid all along. We just needed the courage to stand on it. And sometimes that courage comes from another woman saying, "You're worthy. Now believe it yourself." I believed it now, finally, fully. I believed